The first moment I felt something was terribly wrong wasn't dramatic. There was no crash, no scream, no confrontation at the door. It was far quieter than that, quiet in the way a sinking ship is quiet before anyone realizes it's drowning. It happened the morning I walked into my studio and noticed the folder on my desk had been moved exactly 2 inches to the left. I'm not the neatest person in the world, but I am consistent with my work things. That folder never moves unless I move it. And when I opened it, all the documents inside had been rearranged alphabetically. My mother's habit, her signature, style, her disorder disguised as control. That's when I smelled it, the faint, unmistakable scent of her rose tea fabric spray. She had been in my apartment. Again, guys, we are so close to hitting 10K subscribers on this channel. If you are not subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing. And Don. My name is Naomi Calder, and for most of my life, I mistook survival for obedience. My parents, Helena and Rowan, raised me in a town everyone romanticizes, but no one survives emotionally. The kind of town where parents treat their children's lives like long-term projects rather than actual humans with autonomy. The kind of place where family values really means children don't get boundaries. Growing up, my room was never really mine. Helena would reorganize my shelves because clutter affects intelligence. Rowan monitored every extracurricular I joined because bad influences start with unsupervised minutes. Privacy wasn't a right. It was a reward for obedience. So when I turned 27 and finally moved into a small apartment near the city's art district, I genuinely believed I was escaping. I believed the new lease meant new freedom, that the clean counters and quiet nights would finally belong to me. I believed adulthood was a shield. The first week, Helena asked for a spare key. In case of emergencies, she said, touching my cheek like I was still 12. Every instinct screamed, don't. But guilt was my first language, so I handed it over. I didn't know then that I had also handed over the last piece of myself they hadn't already carved down. For a month, things were peaceful. I worked my shifts at the community center, painted late at night, and came home to silence, the good kind. The kind that wraps around you like a warm blanket. Then the intrusions began. A cardigan of mine hung on a different chair, a mug washed and placed on the wrong shelf. The basil plant mysteriously watered even though I had forgotten to. Small things. So small I tried convincing myself I was imagining it. But the truth becomes harder to ignore when it starts leaving physical evidence. One Friday afternoon, I walked into my kitchen and froze. A neatly packed meal prep container sat on the counter. Turkey quinoa, with the lid sealed, with a handwritten note stuck on top. You need real meals. You look thin. Mom. My throat tightened. She didn't even try to hide it. I called Helena immediately. Were you in my apartment today? She answered cheerfully. Of course, sweetheart. I can't let you live off cereal and whatever else you eat. You can't just come in here. Naomi, she said, the tone shifting to a slow, disappointed sigh. You weren't home. Your generation is so dramatic. That sentence, you weren't home, felt like someone had pulled the ground out from under me, as if the space I paid for wasn't mine unless I was physically standing inside it, as if I couldn't exist outside their ownership. I told myself I'd talk to them calmly, that I'd fix it with logic, that they'd listen because they loved me, but love in their hands was just control, wearing a soft voice. The intrusions escalated. I would return from work to find my mail already sorted on the table, bins emptied, laundry folded, my bedroom window opened to let the stale air out. Every boundary I placed was treated like a challenge. One night, I came home to find the closet door open, and every dress of mine steamed and hanging neatly. The kind of steaming only my mother did. The kind that took time. The kind that meant she'd spent hours in my place. My heartbeat stuttered. This wasn't protection. This wasn't love. This was erasure. I changed the locks the next morning. 24 hours later, Helena let herself in through the building manager, claiming I had accidentally locked her out. She stood in my living room, holding a fresh key, smiling like she had saved the day. I felt something inside me tilt. A shift, a crack. It wasn't loud, but it was irreversible. I changed the locks again, but this time I did something else. I went through my confidential mail, something I almost never opened on time. And that's when I found the letter that snapped everything into place. A notice about my health insurance being billed for a medication I had never taken. At first, I panicked. Had someone stolen my identity? The truth was worse. It was Helena. She had used my insurance card without asking to get her own hormone medication approved under my name. A prescription that wasn't even meant for me. And the worst part, she had done it more than once. I stared at the billing history until the words blurred. I wasn't just losing privacy. I was losing ownership of my own existence. My space. My safety. My identity. And that night, as I sat on the edge of my bed, the realization sank in like a stone. As long as they knew where I lived, they would keep taking more. There was only one way to reclaim my life. Only one way to build a lock they couldn't pick, emotionally, physically, or financially. I had to disappear from their reach. And I knew exactly how I was going to do it. I thought disappearing would be the end of it, that once I cut the invisible cord my parents had wrapped around my life, the story would simply fade into silence. But families like mine don't release control easily. They find new ways, new angles, new tools to keep the leash tight. Mine came through something I never expected. A week after our tense cafe meeting, I checked my mail and found a thick envelope from Cascade Medical Group, my health insurer. At first, I assumed it was routine paperwork. I tossed it onto the counter while making tea, letting the steam warm my hands. But when I opened it later that night, my breath caught. Claim approved. Imaging scan, blood panel, prescription authorization. My eyes scanned line after line. $3,482.17 total, all billed under my name. My pulse hammered. I hadn't gone to any doctor. I hadn't ordered any medication. I hadn't even stepped inside a clinic in months. I flipped to the last page. The signature on the patient authorization form made my stomach twist. It was mine, except it wasn't. The handwriting was slanted, delicate, curving the same way my mother wrote her grocery lists. Marilyn. The unbearable reality sank in slowly, thickly, like mud. My mother had used my medical insurance. Not by accident, not in an emergency, not to help me. No, she had impersonated me. Rage rose in waves, but beneath it was something colder, humiliation. She had crossed a line so deep it didn't even exist in my imagination before now. I called the clinic listed on the form first thing the next morning. A tired receptionist confirmed it easily. Yes, the patient came in on the 14th. Signed in as Jennifer Hale. Same DOB, same address. My address. I repeated. Yes, the one on file. She read it out. It was my old apartment. My mother had used my old address, the one she knew, to pretend to be me. My chest tightened, heat crawling up my neck. This wasn't controlling behavior anymore. It was identity misuse. Fraud. A violation that felt like someone had peeled the skin from my ribs. When I confronted Marilyn over the phone, she didn't even sound shaken. Sweetheart, calm down. I needed tests done. The insurance at your father's job doesn't cover these things. You used mine. Oh, don't exaggerate, she sighed. It's all in the family. What's yours is ours. Besides, you're young. You don't need all that coverage yet. I felt something snap, not loudly, but deeply, quietly, permanently. Mom, this is illegal. What's illegal, she replied coolly, is abandoning your family because of some childish fantasy of independence. I stared at the wall, at my reflection in the window, someone tired of being carved into by people who claimed they loved her. I hung up without another word. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of my bed, knees pulled to my chest, papers scattered across the floor. Every point of betrayal had a timestamp. Every violation left a shadow. The break-ins, the landlord manipulation, the window incident, the insurance fraud, and now the bill in my name. My whole life I had been trained to make myself small, to be the good daughter, to smile and smooth things over. I realized then that goodness, to them, meant silence. They thought I would swallow this too. They were wrong. Revenge came to me quietly, not as rage, but as clarity. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to fight. I simply needed to let consequences unfold where they belonged. The next day, I made 3 phone calls. First, the insurance fraud hotline. I reported the incident without naming her at first, describing it as a person impersonating me. But when the agent asked for more details, something inside me steadied. I told the truth. Second, I called the clinic and had every address, every emergency contact, every access point updated. New information. Locked. Verified with passwords. Third, I set up an alert system so that any future claim required direct verbal authorization from me. No signature. No paperwork. No loopholes. My parents wanted access to my life, so I closed every door they had ever used to crawl through. 2 days later, I got the call I knew would come. Marilyn's voice shook with fury. How dare you report me? Do you know what you've done? They're reviewing my claim. They might send a notice. What you did was fraud. I replied calmly. You impersonated me. I am your mother, she snapped. You are an adult. I said, and adults face consequences. She inhaled sharply. Edward is furious. He said, I don't care what he said. You ungrateful. I'm done, I said, cutting through her spiraling words. If you misuse my identity again, I will file a full report with your name on it. No hesitation. Silence. Then you're choosing strangers over your own family, she whispered. No, I said, I'm choosing myself. The line went quiet. For the first time in my life, she didn't push. She didn't manipulate. She didn't guilt trip. She hung up. The following weekend, I saw them not by choice. It was at Sable Market, the small grocery store near my new building. I had just grabbed a basket when I heard my name, Jennifer. I turned. Marilyn stood there, clutching a shopping bag like a shield. Edward hovered behind her, stiff and unreadable. My heart thudded, but I didn't shrink. Not this time. She approached slowly. We got the notice, she said, about the insurance. They're asking questions. I met her eyes. Because you crossed a line. Edward stepped forward, voice low. We didn't think it was a big deal. That's the problem. I said, you never think anything is a big deal unless it affects you. Marilyn's eyes glistened. We were worried. You pushed us out of your life. We didn't know how else to help. Breaking into my home wasn't helping, I said. Pretending to be me at a doctor's office wasn't helping. Using my identity wasn't helping. A long pause stretched between us. For once, they didn't look angry. They looked afraid. Of consequences. Of losing control. Of losing access to me. I took a slow breath. We can rebuild something, I said softly, but it has to be healthy. No more keys. No more entering my spaces. No more using my name for anything. Marilyn swallowed. And if we agree, then I'll meet you for coffee, occasional dinners, conversations that don't invade my life. Edward nodded slowly, the fight draining from him. We can try. Trying isn't enough, I said. You have to change. Marilyn's voice broke a little. Okay. For the first time, the word actually sounded like she meant it. The days after the lawyer's office were surreal. For the first time, my phone didn't buzz with messages from my family trying to assert control. No passive-aggressive texts. No calls timed to guilt me into replying. The silence wasn't empty. It was mine. I could finally think without scanning for hidden intentions, without bracing for manipulation. I named my apartment safe in my mind, though it was just a modest space in the southern edge of San Jose. White walls, soft morning light spilling over a wooden desk, books lined with the care I always denied myself. I set up my laptop, my workspace, my sanctuary, and for the first time, I wasn't shrinking to make someone else comfortable. I was present in my own life. Work shifted too. I had stepped into a leadership role, quietly rebuilding a project that had been floundering under incompetent supervision. My team looked at me differently. They didn't just see Skyler Lawson, granddaughter of a successful patriarch, or the girl who always kept quiet. They saw someone who could think, decide, act without apology. It was strange, exhilarating, almost dizzying, but the shadow of my family lingered in small ways. Sometimes a memory of my father flicking the lighter over my diploma would drift into my mind. Sometimes I'd hear Vanessa's laugh in the corner of my consciousness, as if the sound were testing the boundaries I had just drawn. That night, I'd walked out of that restaurant calm, but now, free from immediate confrontation, I realized how much I had been carrying: shame, fear, the constant need to justify my existence to people who never wanted to see it. It was Wednesday when I received the first tangible sign that my family's control was finally broken. The email arrived quietly, subject line simple: inheritance transfer complete. I clicked it, half expecting some last-minute loophole, some final attempt to manipulate the process. Instead, the screen displayed confirmation. All assets, all properties, all shares in Grandpa's companies, legally mine. My name in black letters, my signature, my claim. The relief was intoxicating. For the first time, I felt a kind of power that didn't come from fear or anger. I didn't want revenge, I wanted validation, and here it was, undeniable, official, untouchable. I leaned back, letting the chair cradle me, and smiled. Not the small, cautious smile I had offered at family dinners. A full, unguarded, finally free smile. Vanessa called the next day. I let it go to voicemail. Then a text. Skyler, this isn't fair. You don't know what you're doing. We need to talk. I didn't respond. Elaine followed 2 days later, hesitant, her message long and tangled in excuses. We didn't realize how you'd feel. She typed, please, let us explain. I left it unread. My father didn't reach out, probably too shocked, probably too accustomed to controlling from afar. Instead of responding, I took a deep breath and did something revolutionary. I walked outside. I walked to the park near my apartment, the one I had passed hundreds of times without noticing, and I sat on a bench. I didn't check my phone. I didn't think about emails or calls or the what-ifs of family anger. I just sat. Sunlight warmed my skin. The city hummed below like a quiet symphony. I let myself exist without expectation. It was in that quiet moment that I realized the truth. For decades, I had measured myself by the standards of people who never loved me for who I was. Every academic achievement, every small act of independence, every victory had been filtered through the lens of my parents' approval or their lack thereof. Now, the lens was gone. I was allowed to see myself clearly for the first time. And I did. I saw a woman who had endured years of subtle cruelty, manipulation, and dismissal, and had survived. A woman who didn't flinch when her diploma turned to ash. A woman who could claim her inheritance without a shred of guilt. A woman who finally understood that strength wasn't loud. Strength was quiet, deliberate, and rooted in knowing your own worth. The next week, I visited Grandpa's favorite cafe alone. I ordered his usual black coffee, no sugar, the way he liked it when he'd come to check on me after long meetings. I sat with the cup between my hands and imagined him nodding, approving, proud. The warmth of the coffee mirrored the warmth of his memory. In that moment, I wasn't a granddaughter fighting for validation. I was Skyler Lawson, adult, capable, whole. I didn't contact my family for months. Emails piled up in their inboxes, unanswered. Phone calls went to voicemail. Occasionally, I'd catch a headline about a minor scandal at the family company, a note about Vanessa's failed art venture, or a hint of tension in my parents' social circles. I didn't rejoice. I didn't gloat. I simply observed. The control they had sought to wield over me, the authority they had assumed was theirs by virtue of birth, had dissolved, and I hadn't done it by arguing, by pleading, or by screaming. I had done it by simply refusing to give them the leverage they craved. Life continued. I moved into the new apartment officially, unpacking carefully, filling the space with things I loved, books, plants, artwork I'd collected quietly over the years. At night, I would sit on the balcony, looking over the city lights like stars fallen to earth, and feel the slow, steady beat of my own freedom. I wasn't shrinking. I wasn't apologizing. I was becoming. And one evening, as the sun set behind the horizon, painting the city in streaks of gold and orange, I understood that peace isn't something you stumble upon. It isn't something others grant you. Peace is a fortress you build yourself, brick by brick, moment by moment. I had rebuilt mine on the ashes of the expectations, the manipulations, the invasions. And for the first time, the silence, my own chosen silence, was not oppressive. It was protective, empowering, liberating. To anyone reading this, strength is not measured by the approval you receive or the battles you win externally. Strength is claiming your life for yourself, even when the world, even when those closest to you, try to define it for you. I am Skyler Lawson. I am free, and my life, at last, is mine. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever had to reclaim your own space or your own voice, share your thoughts in the comments. Your story matters. And don't forget to subscribe. There are more stories out there. Stories of quiet strength, courage, and choosing yourself when the world insists you shouldn't. Because sometimes disappearing from the lives that try to control you isn't running. It's winning.